Our county has more churches, abbeys, priories and cathedrals collectively than any other in England.
Wow, extraordinary.
Some built with strong Norman influences and developed in the 11th, 12th and 13th centuries.
One of the first features you see when you come into this wonderful church is this font, which must have so much history.
On my journey around Norfolk, I consider the position of these buildings today and what part they play in our community in the 21st century.
When you come into this area of the cathedral, you see how monumental it is.
One of the best spots to view our fine city is from Mousehold Heath, and the eye is immediately drawn to the distinctive spire of Norwich Cathedral, the second tallest in England. In the 920 years since the laying of the foundation stone and the start of the Benedictine priory on the site, there's been a long list of significant developments. For example, the completion of the nave to the west door was mid-12th century, though it was only 30 or so years later the first of 3 fires occurred. In fact, in 1463, lightning struck the spire and the nave roof was destroyed.
There's been riots, revolts and Kett's rebellion, the dissolution of the priory in 1538, Puritans pillaging during the Civil War, and throughout most of the building, the 3 R's: restoration, rebuilding and renovation. And in the last 12 years, the development of the hostelry and the refectory, officially opened by Her Majesty in 2010.
The cathedral sits within the Close, a 44-acre site defined by a substantial flint rubble wall and 4 fortified entry points. St Ethelbert's Gate dates from early 14th century and replaces an earlier structure seriously damaged in the 1272 riots. It is named after the pre-conquest church that stood nearby and was subsequently destroyed when a disagreement between the monks in the priory and the good citizens of Norwich spilled into fierce fighting, which led to the cathedral and the cloisters being set on fire, the priory plundered, and King Henry III ordering the citizens to pay for and build a replacement. The Erpingham Gate has less violent origins. Sir Thomas Erpingham was an important Norwich figure of the late 14th and early 15th centuries. He made substantial donations to the city's religious institutions and distinguished himself when in charge of the King's bowmen at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. The name Erpingham Gate was not used until the mid-18th century, and the statue of Erpingham kneeling was not placed until the late 1600s. But nevertheless, the gatehouse is decorated with the coat of Sir Thomas and the first and second wives, so it's probable that he did pay for it. There is also the Bishop's Gate, which leads to the Bishop's Palace, and the Watergate, more commonly known as Pool's Ferry. The gate dates from the 15th century with the ferry house dated 1647 next to it. It was previously called Sandling's Ferry, as he was the first man to hold the ferry licence. It became the Pool's Ferry Inn at the end of the 18th century and was operated by John Poole as both landlord and ferryman until his death in 1841. A century later, and the ferry ceased when the last ferryman, Cecil Mollett, finished in 1943. Within the Close are a large range of residential homes and some offices, occupying sites of former importance to the cathedral and the community within. This is the site of the 13th century brewhouse, and next door was the bakehouse that became the Three Cranes pub by around 1570s and lasting around 250 years. These buildings all appear Georgian, dating from around 1775, although they sit on the site of the pre-conquest church of St Mary in the Marsh, and the spine wall of numbers 10, 11 and 12 is the north wall of the church. This more modern construction, from the 1960s, sits on the foundations of the pre-conquest church of St Helen, and here we see a flint-fleeced early 19th century house. These Dutch gable buildings are around 1670, and they have a substantial reused wall of the church of St Helen. This was the former site of the plumbery or lead house, demolished in 1640, where lead for the roofs and stained glass windows was fashioned. This is a Victorian Gothic villa built in the mid-1860s. Unlike the city defences, all of the gates and most of the walls survive in excellent condition. The defensive nature of the structure was important because it was not only needed to define the secular city from the ecclesiastical precinct, it was required to perform a military function, as in the 1272 riots.
At 44 acres, this is the largest cathedral close in the country. There are 6 scheduled ancient monuments within it, 65 listed buildings, of which 5 are Grade 1. And central to it all is the building that's been at the beating heart of our city's religious life for over 900 years. For me, it's not until you actually step into the main nave that you fully appreciate how simply vast this building is. You take in the architecture and the pillars and the roof bosses, the organ, and of course, the decorative west window. But you can't help but be stunned and mystified at how on earth did they build all this long before the days of modern building techniques, before the days of scaffolding, long before health and safety. How on earth did they do it?
For the first 450 years of its existence, Norwich Cathedral was also a Benedictine monastery, and whilst there are no longer monks here, the ethos of this tradition is a continuing influence on cathedral life. It can be identified across 3 key values: worship, learning, and hospitality. In the 6th century, Benedict of Nursia wrote his Rule for Monks, based on his own experience of fallible people striving to live out the gospel. This rule proved to be so good and well balanced that it became widely adopted as the model for Western monasticism. In the present day, Benedict's rule continues to be valued both in the church and beyond. It expresses a vision and values for life as a community.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Steve, for your time this afternoon. Tell me about the daily worship here at the cathedral.
Well, worship is at the heart of everything we do. You'll probably have gathered that the cathedral's a very, very busy place, but at the root and heart of it all is our daily rhythm of worship. And we begin every single day at 7:30 in the choir stalls, so where the monks would have sung their round of daily services for the service of morning prayer. And that takes just under half an hour, and that's very much based on scripture, the scripture readings for the day and the psalms set for the day. That's followed by a communion service every day at 8 o'clock. We use different chapels in the cathedral for that, so that all of our chapels are prayed in throughout the week and have a Eucharist offered in them. Then later in the morning, another Eucharist celebrated usually by one of the priests from the wider diocese. And then every single day, 5:30, evensong. That's a sung service with our cathedral choir. And in the holidays, we have visiting choirs come in to do that. Our whole day is wrapped around that rhythm of worship.
Of course, the cathedral used to be originally a Benedictine monastery and a priory, so the rule, Benedict's rule, is still very much the strength here in the community.
Yes, it is. I mean, we at evensong each day we read a little section of Benedict's rule. So we're reminded, and we introduce that by saying that it's part of our tradition to do this, to remind us of our monastic background, but also as a guide to our life in community today. But also the other great Benedictine principles of learning being at the heart of everything. Of course, we've got all the facilities for learning here at the cathedral with our wonderful library, but also our education centre for children. And we have well over 12,000 school children coming through the cathedral each year. Education and learning, very, very important aspect.
Central to the worship in this cathedral is music, with the organ situated at the very heart of the building. And the rich choral tradition at the cathedral is supported by a men's choir along with a boys' and girls' choir, who sing at services as well as at occasional concerts.
The monks would have sung the chants of the daily offices throughout each day of the year, and very much that formed the pattern of their worship. And then since the time of the Reformation, there has been a group of boy choristers here at Norwich Cathedral, as with many other similar cathedral foundations around the country. The choral worship has been absolutely at the heart of the worship of this building. Moving on, of course, a number of centuries to the present day, we have a set of boy choristers and a group of girl choristers who are supported by some adult singers who we call lay clerks. Between them, they are responsible for the singing of choral evensong every day. So alongside this wonderful tradition of boy choristers, we're very pleased here that the girl choristers are now so much an integral part of the musical fabric of the place. We do have a programme of concerts throughout the year. In a sense, it's important to stress that the real core of what the choirs do here is to sing that daily office of choral evensong. But on top of that, there are many other musical highlights. And of course, music is a wonderfully powerful tool to draw people into the cathedral, whether they are believers or non-believers or whatever faith they may be, or of none. Actually, to come in and enjoy music in this magnificent space is a very powerful draw for people. It's almost like the music is, a very living and beating heart to, all these ancient stones. It really brings the whole place alive.